Welcome to the Nitschke Podcast. We've got a repeat guest. So excited about this one. Jamie Hershman's back. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Great to be back again.
I'm not going to call you a special guest. That time has come. Well, that's gone, I should say, and you're just a guest.
Okay.
But I'm really happy you're here. So today we were chatting about topics and thinking what's going to be really relevant to talk about. Always great to get your insight. Off-market. All things off-market. Is it an off-market market? Because things have changed, haven't they? We've had a good run, but
yeah.
What are you seeing right now?
Off-market, for those that don't understand what that term even means, that's really where you're dipping the toe in the water for a vendor. So you're not taking the property to what we'll call the open market with the likes of realestate.com and Domain and your signboard and your brochure. It's the agent doing a little bit more of the heavy lifting and the hustle with our database of qualified buyers and almost one by one bringing people through a property or small groups to test the market. And if we find the buyer that really does suit, then and they're willing to pay at or above market rates, wonderful, a transaction happens off market. But it also gives the worst case scenario with an off market listing is the vendor gets information, and the buyers may come through and say, look, the presentation's not quite right for me, or the pricing's a little more than I was expecting, and that information is really valuable for a vendor in those early stages. We haven't really seen a lot of off-market in the last, we'll call it 18 months of activity, because it's almost been press the button, put it online, get a sale board up and have 1,000 buyers.
It's like drinking from a fire hydrant. It's just...
Have 1,000 buyers just accost you with multiple offers and the highest and best wins.
Yeah.
We're starting to shift into what I'm calling a little bit more of a dynamic market where interest rates have just started to rise, and that's causing more of our vendors to have a little bit of, not quite fear, but a little bit of reservation about how do I do this? When do I do this? What do we do? And it's also, some of our buyers are now going, interest rates have risen a bit. Should I be buying? So the market dynamics have shifted, and I think the off-market piece is one that can and should be explored in a lot of cases. But it's of course not the same advice for every vendor or every buyer. It's got to be one by one where we're really giving advice for the specific case.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's great insight. It isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, is it? What would be some examples that you've seen where off-market is actually the right choice for a vendor? Because sometimes it could be their own personal circumstance, couldn't it?
Yeah, so off-market can work really well where a vendor has some reservations about the market itself, or they've got a lot of personal behind-the-scenes things happening in their life where they're just not either mentally or emotionally in a place where they want to do a full market campaign where the whole market knows that their property is for sale and there's a board out the front and the neighbours know and everyone's excited. They might want to, just for their own personal reasons, have a quieter, more buyer-specific type of campaign where it's really only the highly qualified buyers that are getting the opportunity to look at the property. Others that may want to look at that option are if there's works to be done at a property and you're really saying, and in this environment where the trades are typically being booked up 3 to 6 months in advance, let's say you've got a house that needs painting, the really committed buyer is not going to be put off by a house that needs a coat of paint. If they see what they want, they will put in an appropriate offer. But you may not want to take that property to full market because there's a lot of buyers that would walk through that particular property and go, it's not presented as I would expect an on-market property. So again, it's the one-size-fits-all approach isn't what you would do here. It's what's the motivation of the vendor, what's their current situation, what's the presentation of the home like, and can we, of course, their whole role is to maximise the sale result. Can we maximise your sale result with an off-market campaign, or do we wait a short period and get it on market when appropriate?
Yeah, it's so true. It's a very flexible way of selling, and I think like when I've found in my career when I meet with owners that considering off market versus on market, quite often because I guess off market is definitely quality over quantity. The drinking from a fire hydrant approach that happens later if you've got everything right. It's definitely fewer buyers for better reasons, but I think, if an owner doesn't have a timeline, so if their timeline is fairly open, or they have a deeply personal reason, it could be relationship issues, it could be property related issues that they don't want to sort of publicly promote the property because it needs a lot of work and they're embarrassed by that, or something's happened. But yeah, if time's on their side, you're not really doing any damage starting off market, are you?
The worst case scenario is you provide information.
Yeah.
That's the absolute worst thing that happens is buyers walk through and give us their insight. Sometimes that insight will be really valuable and you'll say, wonderful, we're going to act on that insight, and we're either going to tweak the potential pricing or presentation or marketing that we were intending on doing should we go to market, or you may go, look, that buyer didn't necessarily have their finger on the pulse of what's truly happening, so we're not going to take that advice on board for the current or future campaign. That's the very worst case scenario. The best case scenario is a handful of buyers, or potentially only one or two, walk through the property, one falls in love with it, finds value in it, and puts forward an incredible offer that works for everyone to move ahead and sell off market.
Perfect. And it's not always about price. I mean, obviously we want to get the best price we can, but for some owners, it actually isn't about price. Could be about conditions. It could be speed, efficiency. It could be being discreet. Had examples, I know in my career, and I know you've had similar, where an owner's really needed the ability to rent back or have a very long settlement, but know that they've sold. And off market can be a great way of finding a niche buyer, rather than, as you know, when you go on market, the rules change very quickly because it's governed by that principle that the longer the property stays on the market, the less a buyer's expecting to pay for it. Whereas when you're off market, you could be there an indeterminate period of time. There's no deadline really.
No, it sort of takes that. I mean, in a normal on market, there's probably what we'll call a 2 to 3 week maximum window at the beginning of a campaign where you'd call that the emotional cycle. And then after that, for a buyer, it becomes more of a calculator in the head doing the numbers. This property meets my expectations and I'm willing to pay XYZ for it. Those first 2 to 3 weeks in a on-market campaign, they're looking at it with their heart and their head. After the 3-week window, typically, it's more a head or brain leading the heart.
Logic
transaction.
takes over.
Yeah. With off-market, you don't have those limitations of timing specifically, because it's about the agent identifying a buyer with the right needs and budget for the property and walking them through at an appropriate time. And that may be a week after the listing, or a month or 2 months after the listing, if it's dealt with appropriately.
Yeah, great advice. So a question sometimes we get from vendors is, where do the off-market buyers come from? Like, how do they find out about the house? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good one. And the off-market buyers are really our current and past on-market buyers. So we've met them at other properties that are relatively similar in the last 6 or 12 months. And typically that's a very long period of time. The hottest buyers that we're typically dealing with in this off-market will be people we have held discussions with, taken offers from in the last typically 2 to 3 months. They're the ones that are going to most likely say, I'm looking for a house like this, 4-bed, 2-bath, 1,000 square meters, big shed, and I want to pay X in this suburb. Then it's on the agent to go, what opportunities do I have both on and off market potentially to meet that buyer's expectation and the vendor's profit expectation or timing needs as well.
Yeah, it's like real estate matchmaking. Like,
it is.
It's literally connecting people and property.
Yes.
I think the market we've just come out of, which is the hottest market we've ever seen, I think that kind of that matchmaking approach just was thrown out the window because it was just a case of not enough stock for the demand, buyers just swarming on real estate from all corners of the globe, basically. Yes. Obviously now it's back to a market where a buyer that we might have met 9 months ago with a really specific brief, property comes along, owner really would prefer to go down the off-market, approach, and they're that jigsaw puzzle piece that fits right into that property. It's going to happen, and it's really important to take advantage of that. Yeah,
it's going to happen more and more as this new market, which is, for anyone that's been selling for more than these 18 months, realises this is more our typical or standard market.
Sure is.
Where we have to actually not just open the door and let a flood of buyers through. We have to qualify and understand the needs of the buyers and the needs of the sellers, and, as you said, make the match, find who's most appropriate, and then push as hard as we can to ultimately get the best result for our vendor.
Yeah, no, great comments for sure. Any other insights into off-market that you've got while we're together on the pod today? I mean, I think you've summarised it really well.
Not really. I think it's just something that vendors could and should be open to as an initial step prior to on-market. Again, worst case scenario, you provide information for your vendor. Best case scenario, you get an incredible result without the marketing or the need for the marketing. So it's really something that can and should be utilised in the right markets. And as we're transitioning into this more balanced market as opposed to purely seller market, as we've been in the last 18 months, it's something that I think we'll see more and more of.
I love it, mate. Thanks for your time as always.
Easy.
Fantastic guest on the Nitschke Podcast. We'll catch you on another one soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, mate.
Good on you.